Hello, humanity, more mountains. That brings us to the end of the mammoth Terminator analysis. Um, Fantastic duology of films. You could write even more about it, but of course we have to end it somewhere. I've been asked by a few readers if I would do analysis of further films from T3 right up to the latest one. I don't even recall the name. However, with them not being made by the same director, that level of craftsmanship, the subtext, um, any kind of deeper meaning is really bereft. It's absent in these later films, um, and it can really be seen in that rather than going for this thought-provoking sci-fi uh, tapestry of ideas and story with organic action. Instead, they simply try to top the T1000 with every next installment. So the series has clearly lost sight of what it was about. And then added to that, Cameron essentially closed all the doors at the end of T2. So really writing a sequel would be an exercise in futility. But to that point, a few people have asked me how I would write a T3 if I were to do one, if I were to create one myself. Now, I'm no James Cameron, not by a long shot, but it was an interesting question and it made me think how I would do it. Uh, and initially, I thought it would be impossible because, as you can see, Cameron closed all the doors. It's been tried and none of them have worked. However, he closed all of the doors from a narrative standpoint except for one. And that really got me thinking about how I would do it. So, as an interesting aside, I can share this. Uh, the one narrative thread which doesn't really get addressed is what happens to Dyson's family, right? So Danny Dyson, um, and and Miles Dyson's wife, right? Now, what's interesting there is if you look at it from the perspective of Danny Dyson, these three people come to their place, lay siege, almost kill their father, and then they leave, also taking Miles with them, who then sacrifices himself and he destroys the entire Cyberdyne complex, as you know, viewers will recall. So you've got to imagine this would leave Danny with a lot of questions and curiosities, and he would naturally be drawn towards what it was his father was doing that made him disappear like this, bearing in mind his mother uh, was witness to this story and she saw the arm, right? So you can imagine there, that would be the next logical step had they made a third one with Cameron. So that being said, how or where would you set it? You would have Danny Dyson about to go to university or having just started, working in computer science. He's interested in microchips, that kind of thing. So at that point, what that would then entail is the reach of Skynet from the future, as we've seen in the previous films. Now, the key point here is in the first film, T-800 is the ultimate killing machine. In T2, Cameron flips the audience expectations and he humanizes, he makes the T-800 a tragic figure, so it can no longer be that intimidating thing that it once was, as I wrote in the articles. And that's one of the reasons for the later films' repeated failures. You cannot put the toothpaste back in the tube. So in order to make a third one that would work, you would need to reverse the reversal. Now, that doesn't mean having a bigger, badder Terminator as the bad guy. Would actually be the opposite. So what would happen here is a T-1000 would come back to ensure that Skynet gets built, and the logical next step after Miles Dyson would be Danny Dyson to ensure that he takes up his father's mantle and continues with building the technology to continue Skynet's existence, right? Then how that would work would be the T-1000 would come back and it would take the form or the shape of Miles Dyson. So he would come back and essentially pretend that he would be his father who came back after disappearing, for example. Now you might be wondering, how could he turn into him, without this idea of physical touch, which is how it copies shapes. Now, if you look at the security guard at the Pescadero Hospital, when he comes out of the floor, he doesn't actually touch the T-1000. Rather, it's a shoe. So it can be that when we talk about physical touch, it can be simply as long as that individual touches them in some way. It doesn't have to be directly. So that would get through that loophole. So what you'd have is the T-1000 as the protector figure, but ultimately he would be lying to Danny to try and get him to continue his research. So who would be the people or the person or who would be the party that pursues Danny in this third film? It would be the opposite of expectation. So rather than it being a Terminator, it would be a human hit squad who come back from 2029 or whenever the actual time period would be. And it would be a group of essentially futuristic special forces who were trying to hunt down Danny in like the mid to late 90s, right? And you'd have a T-1000 protecting him. That would be how I would write it. So James Cameron, if you're listening, let's talk. But yeah, that would be how I would approach it. And you can imagine if you set it in the late 90s, it's prior to the internet. So you'd have that interesting burgeoning of technology, the Y2K fears and so on, right? But the key thing here would be, it would be without the whole Sarah John Connor mythology. That's been done. So if they did make a third one, it would be around Danny Dyson. That for me would be the way in which you would make a successful third one. But that ship has sailed, so it's an exercise in interest, and I imagine it would go no further. Then it brings us to the end of the Terminator analysis. Next, what I'll be doing is, we will stay with James Cameron. I will be releasing a series of articles around Cameron's other great sequel, which is Aliens. It's a series. It's an article which I wrote quite a while ago, but it's a lot of fun, a lot of interesting points to take up there. Feedback I received was the article was too long, so what I've done is I've broken it down into more digestible sections. So I'll be releasing that shortly, as I'm preparing for a new, very big analysis around another classic film, which I'll be sharing post the Alien analysis. So coming next is James Cameron's Aliens, a deep dive into that and everything around the film and the meaning within. Then we wrap up here. Enjoy the next series and see you on the other side.